Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper analysis from the perspective of civil services examination. Today we have taken up Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 18th of December 2022 and also the last week's explained sections important articles. Apart from that, we have an important announcement. Please do subscribe to Prelims Test Series and also the optional test series of PSIR. Let us now begin the discussion.
So the first article that we have taken up has appeared in the explained section. Collegium versus NJAC, what is the renewed debate over appointment of judges? And what are the two systems of appointment of judges and what triggered the fresh debate? So the Supreme Court and the Centre are at odds over how judges should be appointed in the higher judiciary. For example, in recent weeks, the government has reiterated the need for National Judicial Appointment Commission, prompting the Apex Court to defend the present Collegium system. Now, if you look into the syllabus of GS Paper 2, structure, organization and functioning of executive and judiciary is a part of your syllabus. And one of the important ways through which an organization can function efficiently is the way appointments are made. And especially in case of judiciary, the way people are appointed is crucial for determining the independence of judiciary. And so in this regard, we are going to understand the constitutional provision, the genesis of three judges case which lies in Keshwan and Bharti case, what challenges Collegium system faces and what is the way forward. Let us now begin the discussion. Now, whenever we talk about judicial and higher judicial appointments or appointment to these constitutional posts, why are we so worried about these appointments? Now, we are worried about these appointments because the way these judges are appointed decides the independence of the judiciary. Now, if you've gone through even the most basic of the text of NCERT, you know the Constitution of India has taken a great care to ensure the independence of judiciary. Let us know in the comment section what are some of the provisions through which the Constitution has ensured the independence of judiciary. Now, why is independence of judiciary so important? Now, independence of judiciary, especially in a democracy like India, is very, very important because first and foremost, you need to maintain public confidence in the judiciary. That public confidence will come only when judiciary will be seen as independent. Then, if you want to uphold rule of law, you have to be independent because more often than not, threats to rule of law come from government. And then, if you want to protect individual rights, fundamental rights and liberties, which again are generally threatened by the government and its actions, you will have to be independent. An appointment is one of the ways through which either the independence can be gained or it can be lost if we are talking about judiciary. Because if the appointment procedure is dominated by the government or executive, many people say that judiciary, higher judiciary will also become like another ministry or an attaché of a government. And so that is why the first article which deals with judiciary, higher judiciary, Article 124 also talks about the appointment to the higher judiciary in the Supreme Court. So Article 124 states that President shall make Supreme Court judges appointments after consulting the Chief Justice of India and other Supreme Court and High Court judges as he considers necessary. So the appointment shall be made by the President of India. But it is mandatory for the President to consult the Chief Justice of India for appointment as a Supreme Court judge as well as other Supreme Court and High Court judges as he or she may think fit. Similarly, for the appointment to the High Court, the appointment is again made by President, but in this case, the consultation is done or is mandatory as far as Chief Justice of India is concerned, but then you will have Governor and Chief Justice of High Court concerned. So now you can see that the Constitution has clearly given the power to the President as far as appointment is concerned. But President has to consult Chief Justice of India. So what does this consultation means? And how far the consultation done with the Chief Justice of India is mandatory for the President or the government is what has led to a lot of legal debate. Because Article 74 says that President of India shall act on aid and advice of Council of Ministers. It will be unconstitutional for the President to not act on aid and advice of Council of Ministers. But Article 124 says that the Supreme Court judges will be appointed by the President after consultation with Chief Justice of India. And so here is what you have the genesis of a problem of appointment to the higher judiciary. So now everyone can see that the collegium system through which the higher judiciary is appointed is nowhere mentioned in the Constitution of India. And so the aspirants, especially those who are in their initial phases of preparation, are often confused as to where this collegium system has come into play. And for that, we will have to go into the history a little bit. I will just take 3 to 4 minutes to explain that. And the genesis of collegium system can be traced back to Keshwanand Bharti case, which was a landmark judgment which was given by a very narrow margin of 7:6, where the Supreme Court delivered its historic verdict which established the doctrine of basic structure to the Constitution of India, which basically means principles and values that cannot be altered by any act of legislature or executive. So of course the verdict was not well received by the government of the day, headed by Indira Gandhi, which viewed it as curtailing the power of the parliament and the government. And so of course there was bound to be a retaliation. And so what followed was a series of unprecedented events. On April 26, 1973, one of the judges who dissented in the Keshwanand Bharti case, Justice A.N. Ray, the person who was against the basic structure doctrine, was promoted to the position of Chief Justice of India. But he was not the senior most judge, because so far the tradition was that the senior most judge of the Supreme Court will automatically become the Chief Justice of India. So his elevation was made possible by superseding 3 more senior judges, all those 3 judges who were in the favor of basic structure of the Constitution. This was a blatant attack on judicial independence by the executive. And so from there, what took off as a legal battle has culminated into 3 judges' case. And these 3 judges' cases have subsequently restored the independence of the judiciary as far as appointment process is concerned. We will of course reflect upon the demerits of collegium system, but let's just quickly go through the 3 judges' cases. Before the 3 judges' case, in 1974, Shamsher Singh versus State of Punjab, Supreme Court held that approval of Chief Justice of India is must in appointing judges of High Court and Supreme Court. Then in 1981, first judges case or SP Gupta case, Supreme Court ruled that the recommendation made by CJI to the President can be refused for cogent reasons, thereby giving greater say to executive. So now you can see it's all about the interpretation of the consultation. So in 1974, Supreme Court says that consultation means mandatory obligation. In 1981, Supreme Court says that consultation is not binding. Then in 1993, in second judge's case, the Supreme Court held that Chief Justice of India only need to consult 2 senior most judges over judicial appointments and transfers. However, an objection raised by executive on appointment, Collegium may or may not change their recommendation, which is binding on executive. So now you can see that consultation in second judge's case is now starting to mean boundation. Of course, there is a scope of reconsideration, but after reconsidering, if Collegium says the same thing, recommends the same name, executive has to follow it. Then in 1998, under third judge's judgment, the Supreme Court ruled that CJI should consult with 4 senior most Supreme Court judges to form his opinion on judicial appointments and transfers. The recommendation of the Chief Justice of India would be binding on the executive. So the genesis of collegium system can be traced to the second judge's cases, which interpreted the word consultation as concurrence, which was then restated by the third judge's cases. Of course, there were some changes which were made in the way the Chief Justice of India is going to consult the senior most judges, but overall, it has restored the same thing. Now, this became a big problem for the government and the executive, because now they lost almost all the say in the appointment to the higher judiciary. And so to undo that, they came up with National Judicial Appointment Commission and the constitutional amendment, which has again been rejected by the Supreme Court. And so right now the procedure is the same as given in the third judge's case and memorandum of procedure, which was signed a few years ago. So as the things stand today, all the appointments to higher judiciary are being done by a collegium of higher judiciary judges. And there is a lot of problem in that. The problem is just not limited to the constitutionality of the provision, but it also deals with merit, corruption, and nepotism as well. Constitutionality because when the Constituent Assembly debates were going on, the Assembly deliberately rejected the proposal to vest the Chief Justice with the veto power over appointments. And so something which was debated in the Constitutional Assembly and was rejected, how can it later on become the part of our legal system? Then the next set of problem comes from Article 74, as I have alluded initially. Because Article 74 demands the President to act on aid and advice of Council of Ministers. Article 124 says that President is going to consult Chief Justice of India. The Collegium system demands the concurrence of the President with or without aid and advice of Council of Ministers. And so this goes against the basic structure, which is the parliamentary democracy, which requires the President to act only and only on aid and advice of Council of Ministers. Now, Council of Ministers may advise against the consultation of CGI, but that doesn't matter. And so according to 214th Law Commission of India, Collegium is a clear violation of Article 74. Then comes the issue of undemocratic nature of the Collegium system itself. Because of the way Collegium system has operated in past 20 years, it has been very non-transparent and closed to outsiders. And no system of checks and balances have existed, which are an essential part of democracy, and especially for appointments to higher judiciary. Of course, since last 2-3 years, Supreme Court has opened up its Collegium system a little bit, but not to the extent which is expected of an institution of such a high dignity. Then there have been numerous cases where people with better qualification and better track records have been sidelined to make way for someone less qualified due to seniority. And so there is a case of ruling over of merit over seniority. Then finally, you have Uncle Judges syndrome. Now these are not my words, but used by Law Commission in its 230th report, which said that nepotism, corruption and personal patronage is prevalent in functioning of the Collegium system. Recently, Justice R.M. Lodha made a comment where he said every third High Court judge is an uncle. It is found that within the High Court, relatives are practicing law at the same place. Most of the judges and advocates have blood relation between them. And this is a very serious issue as far as the independence of higher judiciary is concerned. But it's not like higher judiciary has not taken any step. Supreme Court has made way for proceedings of Collegium system to be kept in public domain. And this was very correct move and very welcome move. It was an obligation and a moral obligation on higher judiciary to do so. Especially after it struck down the NJAC judgment, it basically became incumbent upon the higher judiciary to do so. Then of course the proactive disclosure by judiciary is in sync with the Right to Information Act as well. Now as far as openness as a value of GS paper 4 is concerned, it not only means openness in the functioning of the executive arm of the state, but also in the judicial apparatus, including judicial appointments and transfers. And finally, the right to know of the citizens. The step strengthens democratic process and fundamental rights of freedom of speech as the right to know as an inherent part of the Constitution, which the secretive Collegium system directly violates. So these are the steps which the judiciary has taken, which is very welcome. But now what can be the future course of action? So the first step would be legalizing the Collegium system by the government. Law Commission has already recommended that Parliament should pass a law. Now this law should not be exactly the same as the Collegium system being followed. It should have an element of transparency, but at the same time, it should ensure primacy of the judiciary in the judicial appointment. Then this new system should ensure independence, accommodate the federal concept of diversity, demonstrate professional competence and integrity. It should also have strict criteria for appointment as a judge of higher judiciary. Eligibility criteria to judge the performance and suitability must be formulated objectively and must be made public. So these are some of the recommendations which will go a long way in ensuring that not only the judiciary is independent, but also the continuous struggle which is going on between judiciary and executive can be put to an end. Let us now move on to the next article.
The next article that we have taken has again appeared in the Indian Express. Expert view: resolving LAC dispute with China needs an honest reassessment. And the central point of the dispute is the line of actual control, and China comes in for a severe criticism for violation of the so-called LAC, which neither exists on ground nor on any map, and not even on a piece of paper, is what the contention of this particular piece of article is. But if you look at the syllabus of GS paper 3, under the internal security section, security challenges and their management in border areas, linkages of organized crime with terrorism is a part of your syllabus. And if we talk about the basics, which are always very crucial from the perspective of both prelims and mains examination, it is important for us to understand different kind of boundaries which India shares with its neighbors. So when you read the newspaper, you get to read terms like line of actual control. At the same time, you get to hear line of control. And I'm pretty sure not a lot of people know the difference between line of actual control, line of control, international border, actual ground position line. And so, through this discussion, we hope that you will be able to understand these 4 different kinds of border which India shares.
And so let us start by understanding the simplest of these, which is international border. And so, as the name itself suggests, it is something, it is a line or it is an area which has been accepted by both the countries to be a border. The country A having absolute sovereignty towards this side, B having this side, and this will be international border. And so there is no ambiguity or there is no doubt as to which place or which location on the map belongs to which country. There is absolutely no confusion over the territorial control as far as these 2 countries are concerned. Only then it is characterized as an international border. And so the best example of an international border in case of India would be Radcliffe Line. Through our knowledge of history, we know that Radcliffe Line actually divided the British India into India and Pakistan, of course later on from which was derived Bangladesh. And so let us now move on to the map and do some practical work and try to locate the Radcliffe Line on India's map. And so when we talk about India-Pakistan border, the Radcliffe Line starts somewhere over here, it goes here, and then it ends. Then another portion of Radcliffe Line divided India and Pakistan, which later on became Bangladesh. And so these 2 are the original remnants of Radcliffe Line, which mark the international border of India with that of Pakistan and that of Bangladesh. If we have to be more precise, then international border between India and Pakistan starts in Gujarat and ends at Akhnur sector in Jammu and Kashmir. And since this is a mutually accepted border by both the countries, it has normal mechanisms to solve day-to-day issues. For example, some person might be crossing the international border, and so the repatriation of that person back to the original country. Apart from that, there are certain checkposts. There are transport lines through which the railways and the buses can cross through. All this available on the international border, normally just like any other international border, and similar is the case with international border with Bangladesh. And so that's why this section with Pakistan never observes any kind of firing, because firing is a result of a dispute between 2 nations. And so generally this is completely peaceful border, the border with Punjab, the border with Rajasthan, the border with Gujarat. And so that is why these borders are generally not guarded by Indian Army, but rather they are guarded by border security forces, both along the India-Bangladesh as well as India-Pakistan border. And since they allow normal transport of people, and so that is why they also have normal checkposts. And as I've said, since they are normal borders, there are setups for immigration as well as custom controls, because the exchange of not just people but also goods take place from time to time. Of course, since last 2 to 3 years, most of the activities even along the international border between India and Pakistan have been suspended, but nonetheless, they are the accepted borders between India and Pakistan. Now, whenever we talk about the border between India and Pakistan, there are 2 more components to it. One is line of control and another one is actual ground position line. And to be able to understand what these means, I would like you to go back some time in history at the time of partition, 1947, and you might recall that India and Pakistan entered into quite a bitter war immediately after independence, right? So when India and Pakistan entered into a bitter war just after independence, and as soon as the war stopped mainly because of the intervention from international community, a ceasefire agreement was signed between the 2 nations. Along with the ceasefire line was a truce. And so this ceasefire line, which basically means that the person will stay wherever they are, but they are not going to fight further. And so that is what ceasefire line is, which was accepted as line of control. Because that is line which might not be acceptable to both the nations, but that is the line which actually on ground the 2 nations are controlling.
So just after the independence, a lot of territory of Jammu and Kashmir, or the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir, was captured by Pakistan. Although Indian army was quite successful in pushing back these Pakistani quite a bit, but before they could be completely pushed into the Pakistani territory, a ceasefire was called, and so Indian army had to stop pushing them back. And so if we zoom it in, we'll see the line of actual control looks something like this. So you have international border, and then as soon as international border ends, you have the line of actual control starting right from the Akhnur. And so this region of Jammu and Kashmir beyond the line of actual control is known as Pakistan occupied Kashmir. Now there are two things which are important, which you should note very distinctly over here. First and foremost is the term itself. Line of control is a very particular and specific term denoting only this particular line starting from Akhnur and going up to Siachen Glacier. And this particular term cannot be used for any other particular section of border of India with its neighboring country. Although it is a ceasefire line, but it has been delineated on map, which means that both the armies have a map in which they have agreed that these are the points which when connected give result to the line of actual control. Not just that, these agreements have been signed by both the armies. Now there is a difference between an agreement on a border signed between the armies or among the armies and from among the nation states. And this is what a basic difference between international border and non-international border is. And so you can say that line of actual control is kind of a practical arrangement on ground among the militaries of the two countries. But having been delineated on map and having been agreed by both the armies does not implies that it is agreeable condition or situation as far as both countries are concerned. It is still disputed. We still show Pakistan occupied Kashmir in the map of India, which basically means that we do not as of now agree to this particular line as international border, and so it is not a permanent border according to both the countries, but they have agreed to maintain status quo for at least some time to come. Of course, it has lasted for 60 years. Where this line is located could also change, or it could also transform itself into an international border. You never know. So after having understood international border and line of control, it's time for us to understand this last section of India-Pakistan border, which is actual ground position line, which is basically the line which divides India and Pakistan as far as the control over Siachen Glacier is concerned. It extends from northernmost point of LOC, which is the point NJ9842, and extends up to Indra Kol. Now if you try to understand it on map, there is a point on ends, beyond which this whole region which I am shading in green color was simply not delineated because it is so inhospitable that no one thought anyone could even claim the control over there or could even go there because it is Siachen Glacier. And somewhere around here is Indra Kol. And a straight line connecting these 2 points is actual ground position line. On western side sits Pakistan, and on eastern side we have complete Siachen Glacier to our control. So when we talk about India's border with Pakistan, it consists of international border, with blue color, line of control with black color, and finally the blue color actual ground position line. And so we are left with only one kind of border, and that is line of actual control, which is used to refer to the disputed border which we share with China. And so when we have discussed line of control which has been delineated on map and have been signed by both the armies, but in case of line of actual control, it has never been put on map. And if you are going through newspapers every day, that is the actual problem. Chinese lie claim to a territory which India does not agree to. India sends troops to a region which China says belongs to them, and that is happening only because this particular line or a boundary has never been put on map. There is no agreement between these two countries as to where the actual control should lie as far as both these nations are concerned. And so this particular line of actual control remains ambiguous even as of now. If we talk about its segregation, it is divided into 3 sectors: eastern, middle and western. The eastern sector, which spans Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim, the middle sector in Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh, and the western sector, of course, in Ladakh. However, the line of actual control in Ladakh region does not conforms with the political map of our country, which you are habitual of seeing. It runs something like this, with Aksai Chin controlled by China. Although it has never been put on map, but there is some kind of agreement to actually decide some of the points, and that was done in 1993 through agreement to maintain peace and tranquility. Through this agreement, India and China decided to maintain status quo on their border pending any eventual boundary settlement. So boundary settlement has not taken place, but until then the status quo will be maintained. Wherever the person is sitting will keep on sitting. But that does not prevent one country from imposing their own perception of line of actual control on the other country. And that is the basic reason why we are having so many scuffles between India and China. So I hope that this discussion would have cleared some of your doubts related to different kinds of borders which India shares with its neighbors. Let us now move on to the next news. The next article that we have taken deals with the pension scheme. CM Gehlot defends his government's move to restore old pension scheme. So recently, Rajasthan and Chhattisgarh government have announced the restoration of old pension scheme for government employees for the year 2022 and 23. The OPS was removed by the government in 2003 and was replaced with NPS or National Pension System. In this regard, let us first understand about the National Pension System, and then we will move on to understand the differences between the old one and the new one. It is extremely important from the perspective of prelims examination to understand these key differences, although UPSC might not go into such a detail. So when it comes to National Pension Scheme, which is also a pension cum investment scheme to provide old age security to citizens of India. Focus here on citizens of India. Regulated by PFRDA or Pension Fund Regulatory and Development Authority. When it comes to beneficiaries or who can join, any individual citizen of India, both resident and non-resident in the age group of 18 to 65 years. When it comes to the benefits or beneficiaries with respect to different sectors, it can be categorized into central government employees, state government employees, and private sector individuals. So all those employees of central government who joined the services on or after 2004 had no other option but to choose for new or national pension scheme. When it comes to private sector, it is applicable to both corporate as well as any individual citizen who is not a member of central or state government can join the national pension scheme. So how does it work exactly in reality? When it comes to the contribution, government employees make a monthly contribution at the rate of 10% of their salary, and a matching contribution is paid by the government. For the central government, the employer's contribution rate has been enhanced to 14% from 2019. So what happens to the deducted salary or the contribution from the employee's salary? So it is invested in certain pension funds, which in turn invest in different asset classes like government securities, shares, bonds to generate higher returns, just like mutual funds. When we talk about the returns, NPS is designed on defined contribution basis wherein the subscriber contributes to his accounts. However, there is no defined benefit that would be available at the time of exit from the system. So the defined part is only with respect to contribution and not the benefits after the retirement. The accumulated wealth depends on the contributions made and the income generated from the investment of such wealth. And that is where the state governments have started raising alarm, because you never know the kind of funds you have invested in, whether they are inflation proof or not, or how much return are they going to yield after 30 years. And that is why Rajasthan and Chhattisgarh government have resorted to old pension schemes. So of course it begs for a discussion as to comparison between the two. So when we talk about the nature of scheme, new pension scheme has defined contribution, but old pension scheme had defined benefits. While when you join the services, you already know what are the kinds of benefits you are going to get at the time of retirement, which is subject only to the latest pay commission. When I talk about contribution, new pension scheme had contribution both from the government and employee, whereas in old pension scheme, all the contribution came purely from the government. As far as benefit is concerned, we have understood there is no defined benefit as the accumulated wealth depends upon the contributions made. When we talk about old pension scheme, it had defined benefit, pension of 50% of the last drawn salary. When we talk about new pension schemes, pension amount, it depends upon the number of years of service. Longer the service of year, higher the contribution, higher the pension.
Whereas in old pension scheme, it depends upon the last drawn salary, and it had to be 50% of the last drawn salary. So this much discussion is sufficient to understand not only the national pension scheme, but also the comparison between old pension scheme and new pension scheme. Let us now move on to the next article.
This article of the Hindu newspaper appeared on page 8 and talks about the preservation with respect to an important sanctuary known by the name Tal Chapar. Now, Tal Chapar sanctuary is known for an important animal, Blackbuck. It is an Indian antelope, and it is very, very important not only from the environmental perspective for the people of Rajasthan, but also from the socio-religious purpose. This animal is considered to be very sacred and auspicious in certain tribal communities in the state of Rajasthan. Tal here means the small pond or a lake. So Tal Chapar is a sanctuary. It is in the Churu district, which is north central part of Rajasthan, and it has received the protective cover against the proposed move by the state government. Now, state government previously was under pressure from the miners as well as the stone crusher, because this is a place of Western Aravalli where small hills are being exploited to extract the stone for the construction purposes. These stone miners and the crushers were looking forward to reduce down the eco-sensitive zone around the Tal Chapar sanctuary so that they can exploit more natural resources for the commercial purpose. And state government was looking forward for extension of this plan to reduce down the eco-sensitive zone. However, because of the interference made by the international organizations, NGOs as well as the Rajasthan judiciary, government has restricted its move. The sanctuary, as we have said, is famous for the black bugs. It is an Indian antelope and is very auspicious to the people. Blackbuck, as we have said, is an Indian antelope and is mostly found in the grassy plains and the light forested areas. The western part of Aravalli range in Rajasthan is known for seasonal grasses and light forested areas. These areas are known to provide habitat even to the winter migratory birds as well as the critically endangered great Indian bustard. However, apart from that, Indian antelope, blackbuck, is also found here, and this is the same species which was in news for the hunting by a famous Bollywood actor around 2 decades back. As per the IUCN status, it is a least concerned species, so falling population, or for that matter even the population or the number of individual of this community, is not a matter of concern. As far as protection is concerned, so Government of India has kept the Indian antelope or blackbuck under the Schedule 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act, which simply proves that this species enjoys one of the highest level of protection from the encroachment, poaching, hunting also. If any person is found to be hunting blackbuck, that person is going to face one of the severest penalties and term imprisonment. Now, let's talk about the eco-sensitive zone. Every national park or a wildlife sanctuary enjoys a particular buffer zone. Around this buffer zone, there lies the important areas where people habitations or the village habitations are normally occurring. People stay in these areas and they enjoy different kind of protection as well as conservation. However, because of the environmental degradation, it was observed that the peripheral areas of a protected area are also leading towards the degradation of the core area. So let's say if there is an activity occurring at a position A, that activity might hamper or bring out the polluted activities in the national park. Let's say there's a mining activity which is going on in area A. Now, the sound of mining activity might lead to the deterrence in the health of important species living in the national park. That is one of the reasons why government under the National Wildlife Action Plan 2006-2016 declared that there are going to be an area around the protected area, and this is going to be known as Eco-Sensitive Zone or ESZ. As far as declaration of this area is concerned, it is the duty of the state government to provide all necessary requirement to create an economic sensitive zone around the protected areas. This is done on the behest of the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. The legal status of the declaration of this zone comes from the Environmental Protection Act of 1986 to protect the important species. The area of eco-sensitive zone can extend to 10 kilometers around the outer boundary of a protected area. This can even be further increased if it is being ordered by the central government. The purpose is straightforward. It is to provide the protected areas from the external impact, which also include the pollutions as well as environmental degradation. The activities which are completely prohibited in the eco-sensitive zone includes the commercial mining, which is also the core area of this article which was published in the newspaper, using of sawmills, polluting industries including the noise pollution, scent pollution, water pollution and the air pollution. And it also includes major hydroelectric power projects because they might submerge the large area of the protected land. And the last one is the commercial use of wood. So cutting down the forest for the commercial use, cutting down of the timber for the commercial use is not at all allowed in the eco-sensitive zone. The activities which can continue include the ongoing agriculture but not any new transfer of land to the agriculture. The safeguard of ongoing agriculture was provided to not disperse or to not remove the existing holders of the land, which are mostly the poor farmers and the tribal population. So, ongoing agriculture or the horticulture practice can continue. Rainwater harvesting, which is pro-environment, organic farming, which does not degrade the environment, use of renewable resources such as solar power, wind energy and others can easily be installed in the eco-sensitive zone. So, the decision of the government to roll back its order is a nice step, and in the future as well, government across the nation should keep this in mind that eco-sensitive zones should be maintained in order to protect the sanctity of the protected area as well as to provide sustainable development to the flora and fauna across India. With this discussion please, let us now move to the next article for the day. This article of the Hindu newspaper appeared on first page and talks about the recent decision taken by the GST Council, which is also a constitutional body or a constitutional organization. Now, the moment we hear a constitutional organization, it is important for your GS paper 2 in the mains examination. Now, GST Council has kept certain tax rate same but deferred the key reforms that should have been brought in the recent economic scenario. The major decisions that were taken by the government include that they have scrapped the 5% GST on the husk of pulses. The tax on ethyl alcohol supplies to the refinery for the blending to the ethanol is now slashed to 5%. So this will definitely reduce down the prices of petrol that is hybrid. And the other important decision include that the higher taxation of 22% will now be imposed on the SUVs only because they are considered to be more heavier vehicles, more polluting vehicles, especially the diesel category. And this money is going to be used for the compensation cess. This compensation will then be distributed among the various states for meeting out their demands that they cannot meet during the COVID crisis. Now, beyond that, let's understand about the functioning of GST Council, how it is composed, what are the basic issues with respect to the GST Council, and what government has done since its formation till now to make it more comprehensive and easy to govern.
Well, GST Council, let us understand some basics about this organization. Well, this is a constitutional body, so by default it becomes important for your GS paper 2 in the mains examination. It is a body for making recommendations on the union and the state government on issues related to goods and service tax. So whatever they will recommend, it will be based on the GST only. As far as composition of the council goes, it is chaired by Union Finance Minister, that is Nirmala Sitharaman, Minister of State in charge of Revenue or Finance, Minister in charge of Finance or Taxation, or any other minister nominated by each state government as their particular member. So there are three people or three kind of composition. First being Union Finance Minister, then Minister of Finance for State, and the last one being the Finance Ministers or the Taxation Ministers
from states. As far as recommendation of the council is concerned, these are based on the taxes, cess, surcharge levied by the union, state and including the local bodies which may be subsumed in the GST. The second being those goods and services that may be subjected to or exempted from the goods and service tax. And next is the rates and the slabs of the GST, including that we have right now is 5%, 12, 18 and 28. Half of the total members of the council shall constitute the quorum at its meeting. It means if there are 30 members, 15 would be forming the quorum. Quorum means the minimum number of strength that is required to conduct a meeting. Every decision of the council shall be taken by 3/4 of the majority, which is very high. That means 75% of the people or the members should agree on a point. And the weighted votes of the member present and voting is as follows: central 1/3, state 2/3. Well, before going ahead with the issues of the GST Council, you should remember that there is a separate article which was added in the Constitution as 279A, and this article deals with GST Council. You should remember this because it is a constitutional body, hence it should be having certain provisions in the Constitution as well. So this article was added. I want you to comment in the comment box that amendment, that's constitutional amendment which was used in order to include this article in the constitution. You can comment your answer in the comment box. If you do not know the answer, just Google it out and answer in the comment box. As far as issues of the GST is concerned, the first and the foremost being the delay in the meeting. Of course, the current meeting, which is going to be the 43rd, is going to be after 7th month of delay. Well, as of the provisions in the functioning of the GST Council, the Council should meet at least once in a quarter. The second issue is that many of the states have utilized or have demanded the GST Council to drop the GST on those supplies or equipments which are used for the current viral fight. Actually, the current taxation is at 12% on the oxygen concentrator and 5% on the vaccine. The next being the revenue shortfall and the GST compensation. In 2020, many of the states were facing high fiscal deficit. Some of the states were even close to 10%, which means they were high on their revenue expenditure. And this is the reason why they were asking for high GST compensation, which is provided under the GST Compensation Act 2017. This is a separate act which provides for extra compensation to the state. However, they were not receiving that, and this created the entire issue as such. And the last one being the dispute resolution mechanism, under which the Constitution says the GST Council can set up a mechanism to adjudicate any dispute between center and the state or between the state on issue arising from the council's decision. It is yet to be set up. So suppose if there is an issue between Maharashtra and Punjab, or maybe Maharashtra and Punjab together versus the center, or maybe all of them against many other states. So that kind of dispute within the council should be adjudicated by a different mechanism. However, that mechanism as of now has not been created and the issue still survives. So what should we do? The government should set up such kind of dispute resolution mechanism and ensure as a way forward to conduct the meeting of the council as periodically as possible.